I'm also interested in those intense experiences, which again have the dimension of being completely taken out of oneself and returned to it. I mean, I'm not a ski jumper, and I don't intend to try and become one. It's too late in life. But I imagine that sense of absolute loss in the total focus on the activity, but also the intense awareness, because you get something wrong of oneself. Because if one gets something, one is dead. So, and of course, one aspect of that that's really interesting is, as you say, although in certain ways these kinds of experiences are um, socially sanctioned. We have ski jumping and the Winter Olympics or whatever. There is also the sense that they are suspect because they're possibly dangerous. They might lead people to do things which are not well behaved, to use that term. And I think all one can say about those is, well, that's life. That's life. Do we really want to live in a world where everything is made safe, where that kind of possibility no longer exists? And I'm very, very doubtful that we do want to live in that kind of world. But of course, in the Western world, in which we are lucky in many ways to live, that emphasis on safety and security is so much to the fore, um, that I think we've lost in many ways a kind of sense of the edge of life, and these kinds of characters remind us of that. And I think that's one reason why Herzog is interested in them in his films. So, as a man and as a philosopher, I wouldn't want to make a judgment about this kind of thing should stop. We have to live perhaps with a certain sense of the riskiness of this, and part of that is people who, like Lawrence, and to come to him, Philippe Petit, who, as it were, live a whole life, as I put it, in the spirit of rapture, or a life that's coloured by the sense of rapture. And I don't mean by that, of course, that they're in a state of rapture the whole time. They're certainly not. But there's a kind of, immense energy, an immense sort of grasping of life that these people possess. And Philippe Petit, of course, is very famous for this walk that he did between the obviously now destroyed Twin Towers in the World Trade Center in New York, which he did in 1974, entirely illegal. I mean, that's the other thing that one has to say. The whole thing was not acceptable in any way, totally illegal. It took him years to plan this thing with the team. Had anyone known that he was doing this, of course, it would immediately been shut down and so on. And yet, it was a kind of moment of breathtaking rapture for him and for everyone else. Um, and there's a film that I mentioned in the book I draw on it called Man on Wire, which is marvelous documentary about him and about this kind of rapturous, obsessive thing. So I'm no, of course, as you said, you're not really interested in becoming a tightrope walker. Neither am I. Um, but the sense of living with that kind of energy, that rapturous energy, seems to me something that we need to remind ourselves is a possibility. And as I try and put it in the book, you sort of can try and catch the spirit a little bit of what Philippe Petit is doing. So he describes himself as being an amazingly egotistical man. Uh, and it's completely clear, that in the film Man on Wire, his girlfriend at the time says that when she met him, it was clear that he demanded complete, to fall in line completely with his project. That her what she wanted to do with her life just didn't come into it, and she also knew that once the walk across the Twin Towers between the Twin Towers had been completed, she knew that her relationship with him would end. Indeed, many of his friendships collapsed because it'd been so intensely grouped around that experience, that thing that he did. And you could take two attitudes to that, or at least two. You could say, well, that's an egotistical man who, didn't care about enough. Or you could say, well, that's just what life is. She chose to go for that, and it gave her something. And if you watch the film, I think that it's clear she absolutely lost herself in him and in his project, but at the same time, through that, obtained something unbelievably valuable. So these people can no doubt be difficult to come across at times. I'm sure that other examples I briefly mentioned in the book, like D.H. Lawrence, for example, were probably wanted sometimes to run a mile, but I think that sense of that life, of a life lived with that kind of intensity, is something, again, we can remind ourselves and perhaps find a little bit of space for it in our lives, a little bit more. And I think sometimes it would be no bad thing.